right, you're welcome back. That's the take-in for the entertainment as well as business news. Now we're going straight to the core of discourse on the show this morning. As we rightly informed you at the opening that we're taking a look at the state of governance and the culture of impunity in Nigeria. We're kicking off with a public affairs commentator, a friend of the house, in person of Mr. Olalekan Adigun. Very good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank
Welcome to UNILAG TV.
Good morning. Nice having you on board today. When we talk about state of governance and the culture of impunity, what do you have to say as regards that?
Thank you very much for the question, because the question of impunity, any way you want to look at it, is not something that is particularly what's human nature abhors, really. Because if you look at Thomas Hobbes, a British philosopher, in his book The Leviathan, he talked about man in the state of nature. He talked about man and the life of man. That was before the introduction of government. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? He said man's life was solitary, brutish, and short. And what does that mean? It means that without any higher check on man's natural instincts, there is the tendency to exhibit its beast nature, its evil nature, if there is no higher agency to control, or if that higher agency is very, very weak. That was why he made that statement, and that statement has stood the test of time. Also in 1971, in Stanford University, Professor Philip Zimbardo performed an experiment. It's a very interesting experiment about man's nature. And that experiment was coming to test why Hitler's soldiers and Hitler's few lieutenants behaved the way they behaved during the Holocaust. You see neighbors, people that were hated to neighbors, who performed acts of barbarism against each other during the Holocaust. So he wanted to understand why that was the case. So he set up a prison, sort of, to try to understand why people behave the way they behave. Some people were to behave like prisoners, others were to behave like prison guards. The experiment was ordinarily to take 2 weeks, but the interesting thing is that the experiment closed at the end of 1 week. Why? The people that were chosen for their strong moral authority, those that were chosen for their high sense of mental health, started to behave like real prison guards. They resorted to acts of barbarism, asking their fellow students to wash toilets with their bare hands, or sometimes to even put their nose into the toilet. Some acts of barbarism or such. But what happened? So Philip said, no, we can't condone this anymore. So at the end of a week, they had to shut down the experiment. And even those guards that did nothing, that didn't do such, didn't prevent other people from doing it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So it shows you that impunity is something that is inherent in man. Coming down to government is an agency through the will of the state is through which the will of the state is realized. If the government is weak, if the laws are weak, then acts of impunity will not even go away. Are you getting my point now? Because if you are weak laws, like I said in my opening statement, if the higher agency that was to check this instinct in man is very weak, acts of impunity will continue for as long as we are alive.
Okay, so let's bring this to governance.
Okay.
What constitutes acts of impunity in governance?
Acts of impunity in governance is just when people believe that they can come into government or politics and get away with just anything. And people come into politics with the belief that they can actually have their way on no matter how brazen. For instance, before I came into the studio, I heard you talking about the kidnap of a sitting governor in 2003. Was it 2003 now, 2004? A sitting governor in Anambra State. And nobody went to prison for that. I can't imagine that happening in a sane society. You have a situation in government where people believe that they can loot. Look at the 2019 election. A lot of, about the last time I counted, about 50 something people were arrested for different electoral offenses. Nobody is in jail today.
Found guilty.
Or found guilty. And that is because they know, and these things will continue to repeat itself. Because people know that they can always get away with things like this. People are aware that all you need to do is to pay somebody and pay this person. Before you know what, you are out again.
Let's break it down a little bit.
Okay.
Don't you think that whether APC, PDP, APGA, YYY, or SSS is still the same circle, the same of the same? Don't you think that you're going to say something?
No, I would just want him to, save the thought. We'll go on a quick break, and then when we come back, the conversation will continue, and it will be taking quite an interesting turn. Alright, you're welcome back. The discussion is about to continue, and we have again in the studio now joining us Dr. Abiola Akiyode-Afolabi. She is a lecturer at the Department of Public Law at the University of Lagos. She is also in charge of the Transition Monitoring Group of the University of Lagos. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
And thanks for joining us on the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Okay, before we went on that break, you were about asking Mr. Adigun about...
Yes, you talked about some offenses in the country and a lot of people still not found guilty and all of that. But my question is this: do you think that is still the same of the same, as some of those things are politically motivated?
If you look at politics, really, I think it was Gaetano Musca and Robert Michels that talked about the plurality of the elites. That is, the elites always have a way, the political elites now always have a way of replacing and replenishing themselves in many areas. But if you look at it, it's not too much of politics. It's a question of law. Are we ready to, because law presupposes that if you commit an offense, there should be punishment, commensurate punishment to go with it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? But if in the absence of that, if you get away with it once, twice, I get my point. Brazen acts of impunity, and people are allowed to get away with it. Then the motivation is for others to want to get away with similar offenses. I get that's my take on that. So it's not too much of politics. It's too much of whether we have strong institutions to cope with issues that can guard against acts of impunity or not.
Okay, Doc. Let me come to you. Let's bring this conversation to you. Impunity in governance, in the eyes of the law. What are we talking about, and where do we lay the bulk?
Well, I think that for Nigeria, it's a peculiar state and it's a peculiar nation. There are three things that we had agreed as a country that, whether we like it or not, to be able to move forward. That Nigeria must be a democracy, so meaning that there should be no military rule. So we've suffered so long for years under the military, and we have made up our mind to move on a civilian regime. So that's given. We had also agreed that there must be some modicum of good governance, as a country. And we have also agreed for the third thing, which is the rule of law. And interestingly, the government of the day, when they came in 2015, talked about the necessity for the rule of law. And I think that we know that, even as a country, for quite a while, that without the rule of law, we won't be able to address a lot of the problems that we have with respect to impunity and a whole lot of things. But unfortunately, it looks like the character of the government has not really shown a lot in terms of commitment, to addressing impunity. To be able to address impunity, there are so many things we need to do. One, you must have institutions that are effective, and efficient. Without an effective and efficient institution, people they must know, because it's also about information. You must know that you need to report, and the people that you are reporting to must also know that they have a responsibility, to address whatever report. And that's why you see that there is a whole lot of discussion about not trusting the institutions that we have.
That's because I was thinking we would get there. Let's take a look at the nature of our institutions.
Yeah.
Are they wired? Are they matured enough? Are they set to give us, to ward off these potentials of impunity in governance? Let's take our security agencies, for instance. You painted a scenario at the opening of the show. So we have a case of an armed robbery somewhere, and then several calls to the security agencies. They won't show up until the deed has been done. And when they come, they just start picking people on the road.
That know little or nothing about.
That know little or nothing about, and then throwing them into their trucks, drive them away, and then by the time we go to the police station, these people are already made to write statements about things that they did not even witness.
And then
you have to pay to even bail them. It gets to the point of, yes, you go there, you see the description, bail is free. But we all know that when you get there, it's a whole different game. So our institutions, especially the security now, and this culture of impunity, how do we merge these two? Good governance, rule of law, and then the formation of our institutions in Nigeria.
And that's why I'm talking about the issue of effectiveness and efficiency. Because for so long people have done things and nobody called them to order. Nobody questions them. So it looks like we have a system whereby nobody's reporting to anyone. So you can, and of course, people come up with different reasons for why things didn't work. A police officer will tell you the reason why I cannot respond to armed robbery is because there's no fuel in the vehicle. And in the real sense, there's no fuel. You speak to the National Human Rights Commission chair and say there's a problem and there's a petition that you need to respond to. And it tells you the government did not give us money to do the work. If we are going to do that public hearing, it's going to cost us about 5 million, and we don't have it in the budget. So the issue is deeper than that. So the manifestation of inefficiency could also be, we need to look at it from a wider point of view. So it is not something that we can blame the police entirely for. It's something that we need to blame the entire system, because it's like what is happening in the top is affecting so if there is no efficiency at the top, you are not likely going to get it can't trickle down.
Sorry, what you've said now, can you relate it to corruption really?
Yeah, and that's also, if you also see corrupt practices, yes, we talk about, we have the EFCC, we have the ICPC, we have the, we have the DSS, and a whole lot of this group of people that are supposed to be addressing corruption. But while they're supposed to do their work, despite the fact that some of them get budget because the government says this is our priority area, they get budget funds from air, they get funds from international, because at the international level too, they have realized that one of our major challenge as a country is corruption. So they want to invest money in ensuring that we address corrupt practices. Despite all that, people, nepotism is still a problem. Somebody feels that before I make a decision, I need to get a go ahead. Then you hear languages like order from the above, and you ask them which of the above is giving the order, and the above itself might not even know. So then it becomes what people call overzealousness. So you are taking that step not because somebody really gave you the order, but because you assumed that if we don't arrest this person, if we arrest this person, maybe the person is the president's friend, so the president might not be happy. So you take some steps. So, and that's why I said it's about inefficiency right from the top, and that affects the entire. And it comes like in trickles. Then it's gathers the storm to the extent that the country has a reputation, despite all efforts. Yes, there might be a change within a short period of maybe from where we were in 1999 to 2007. It might be a little bit.
I'm happy with what you just said now and the way you ended it. Don't you think there's been a difference in the culture, with this incumbent administration? Because I know so well that one of the actions of President Muhammadu Buhari was to actually tackle corruption, really. Did you think that has actually reduced a little bit to the lowest minimum?
I think tackling corruption, we need to be very, very careful with the use of the lexicon within that regard of tackling corruption. It has been happening since Shagari's era, but we still had this former Minister for Transport, who was the chairman of Presidential Task Force on Rice, that was always saying, nobody has died. We are not seeing dead bodies on the streets. This has been happening and things like that. So we need to be very, very careful about that. But she said something very, very striking. In 1999, yes, we seemed over 20 years ago, that's 21 years, 20 years now, since the era of democracy. Now, even if Buhari were to be president in Obasanjo's shoes in 1999, you will probably have behaved the same, because we are just emerging from the military culture. We're just coming out of military rule, long years of military rule. The Abacha administration being one of the very, very worst in terms of human rights record. So you don't just expect democracy to just overturn or overdo that in just maybe 1 year or 2 years. You get what I'm trying to say. So, and the culture of disregard for the court orders and those things were really, really institutionalized during the military era. But you don't just expect such. So it takes a gradual process. It takes something. It's more of a psychological process. And one thing that I discover is that a lot of people just, especially after the Abacha era, many people just wanted the military back to their barracks. I get to my point, because the military was synonymous with impunity and things like for offenses you didn't come. Offenses like environmental offenses, you get punished. You see people being beaten, almost like to the degrading level. I get him for even minor offenses. You offend the soldier's wife, maybe the soldier is your neighbor, and I mean something that should have been purely a civil matter. You take an entire battalion, almost like an entire to come and beat up one civilian. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So all those things happened during the military. It's just those things, and that's why I think the word bloody civilian, I think it has been erased from the, but it has not been even removed from their conscience. Are you getting my? It's no longer in the military dictionary, but you still see such attitude, and it's not just in the military. You also look at men in uniform. Look at last month, for example. There was a day I was coming from Yaba to UNILAG. I boarded this campus shuttle, and a woman in uniform, in last mile uniform, she's not even armed. For no offense this driver committed, I was seated in the front, and with the bare hands, She broke the driver's side mirror. I was like, who does that? I stay in Mushin. I have seen women, break bottles with their bare hands, but I don't know a law enforcement official can never do that. That was what even got me interested. I was like, wow, you did this. For what? Because we are in uniform. I picked her number, I picked her name and everything, and she went to report herself in Ekmori. Ekmori is like their zonal office. Okay. I wrote a petition copying the governor, I went to their office in Oshodi. She was summoned, but the driver again, they said if they will blacklist the driver became afraid. They will be, if you apply this road, I get to my point. So all those things, nothing has happened to the woman. I'm
seen her back at that same duty post.
That same spot as St. Agnes. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because you know you can, and a lot of people don't. She mentioned reporting. How many people can actually follow up?
Yeah.
Right there, when the incident happened, the other guy was saying that you go get to where they go. Now you go suffer them. I was like, who does that? Because of you, I'm going to show you the next day. I will take my time. I got to the library that day. I sat down to type a 700-word mail. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand? It's not because they realize not too many people have time to follow up. All these unnecessary bureaucratic bottlenecks were deliberately, let me not say deliberately now, deliberately to frustrate people from actually doing the little they can do. When Ombudsman was formed in 1975, Dr. Taishu Lani was my proprietor. I went to Mayflower. You get so. As in, when he was trying to demonstrate leadership by example, he was trying to do what he could do. But in that same 1975, something happened. He was not with his driver's license when what's it called, law enforcement. He said because he had to resign. It's not too many people that can do that. Do you understand
that culture of resigning in Nigeria? Public position. I mean, in the face of any.
Not like he doesn't have the driver's license. He had it, but it's not with him. As at the time moment. He was driving, he said, "No, this should not be happening." He got to his office and resigned.
No, Doctor, let me come to you and a dimension to what he just said. So governance is a mix of politicians and bureaucrats, public servants, and of course the technocrats and the politicians. Where does the bulk lie? Is it the fault of the politicians who just want to come in and wield the bureaucracy in favor of their own will, to achieve their own will, their own set objectives, where oftentimes, the issue of personal interest now cripples in, or the bureaucrats who should actually stand their ground and say, this is the rule, this is what the books say, this is how we should go in running this, in pursuing this goal? Where does the bulk lie?
But I think that we have a systemic problem where even when the law gives you the power to do something, before you do it, you take a second breath. So there's a major. I know that when Babatunde Fashola was here, he used to say that there was a day was it a military man who was
he arrested a military man.
Yeah. So, but it was then saying at that time that the thing about negotiation is that when you find them doing something wrong and you are being arrested by a police officer or whatever, they tell you, let me call. They always have somebody to call. And say, let me call the commissioner. And the person says, let me call. We find somebody to call, and the next thing, the person is free. So I think that there's a systemic problem which does not allow the system to run the way it should run. When I was talked about the Public Complaint Commission, we have had a Public Complaint Commission since 1975. So then the question you ask is, how many Nigerians are even aware that they exist? And when they exist, the law with which they were created is not even implemented in accordance. I was teaching the students about the Public Complaint Commission yesterday, and we're looking at, as at today, the thing says that if you under the offenses and punishment, it says it's 500 naira or 6 months imprisonment. That's if they invite you to come to the public. So would you not just do that? And it's supposed to deal with one, efficiency within the civil service. You know, people should be able to lay complaint to them. They should be able to make decisions that we are and so it's not for lack of structures. So that's the point I'm trying to raise. So it's not for lack of structures, it's not for lack of institution. It's rather because the structures and institutions are not running in the way it should run because there are a lot of assumptions. And I think that that's why my argument will be that one of the things we need to do as a country is to have a culture, like a culture shift. There must be a shift somewhere, either by reorientation, either by, there must be a shift, or else we're all responsible.
Yeah.
We are, whether directly or indirectly. Some of us here in Yaba, when our students are coming in, several of them have been arrested by SARS. Some arrested by
even
SARS.
at UNILAG Junction.
And doing nothing. So, and we're not responding to it. We all hear about it. We don't take steps until when somebody says it's enough. You cannot continue, to do this to our students.
And with the use of social media these days.
And take it and we deal with it. So that's why I'm saying that for every one of us, we have a role to play. And I think that's the point that he's trying to raise. You can go that org, then you get to the level where you are taking the last man and you still get stopped.
But I don't know that.
I wanted to add to what he was saying. This statement, do you know who I am? And this other one, I will deal with you.
It's Nigerian parents,
even common people that are nobodies use it all the time. I will deal with you.
Because it's a language that is acceptable in the community.
But I know we have in Yaba here the Office of the Public Defendant, really. I don't know if you know about it. So how many people actually make use of the Office of the Public Defendant in you? And I know so well that the incumbent governor of Lagos State, when he came on board, when he was addressed, he had a meeting with the last officials and then he said, nobody should call me at any point in time. Oh, I want to call the governor. I want to call this commissioner. But I want to ask you, do you think it's just the black man thing, really, that is affecting us? Or you think, if we're not blacks, do you think it would have been a different case?
I don't think it's the black man thing. Yeah. I think it's because we're not committed to the structures that we create. There's, the country is maybe the society is too hierarchical, and I think that's one of the things that we need to first break down so that people can have access, to the top to speak with them. You see, even students in school, there's a limit to who they can speak with, and they have a challenge. They needed to speak to someone, but you're afraid to go and knock. And whereas in other places, so I think it's just trying to ensure that our system, our society is friendly to people so that it can allow for growth.
What about the gap between the rich and the poor? Don't you think that is also another?
That's a major.
I was even planning to come to.
Yes, because like the example you gave, the cloudy Nigerians really who can actually afford to pay any bill to get you to be arrested and all of that. Obviously, we'll definitely continue to what's it called now? Impress you. Yeah.
We'll continue to. So I think it's no doubt that it's a class society. Yesterday or 2 days ago, El-Rufai had taken his son to
a public school.
To a public school.
In Kaduna.
Interesting, commendable. But there's a big question there. At what point did we see that necessary as a country after we have destroyed the entire
public education system?
But at least it started from somewhere.
Now,
so why are we now beginning to criticize?
No, it's not about
criticism now.
It's not about
what is there is that
that's why I started saying that it's commendable, but it doesn't solve the problem. People are asking a lot of questions. It would have been nice if I was one of his commissioners. I would say, okay, because my guy has done that.
Every commissioner
and all of that. Maybe that will the only thing that can translate to that will make sense to us. Because the boy is 6 years old, maybe if he was older than that, maybe we would not agree. So the only thing that is how that will translate. So we want to check in the coming 1 year. How will that translate to developing the public school? It is not about the symbol. It's not about the symbol. I expect that if he's doing that, he has an intention. I want to upgrade the level of the public school.
Education.
So beyond just taking my child there, then I want to understand that things are happening around this country. They had a millennium school project in one state, I think Osun State. So if that's going to lead to that, so I've gone there and I've seen my son is there. So I need to look at the skill set of the teachers, build their capacity, look at the security of schools. Is the son going to be going there with police every day? So
or he works there like the kids of every other person.
We need to look at it. So there can be public school. So some student can be more
privileged
than the
others.
You know, so
segregation again within.
No, I even wanted to, on the issue of public, we make this argument that public schools are, schools for never do well, something. It's just because of the investment. As we have seen in Rwanda, for example, Rwanda has actually achieved a lot in the area of public education. Yes, and in fact, it has some of the best models in Africa for public education in Africa today. But what we are saying is that it's not just about El-Rufai saying, and she talks about the National Orientation Agency at some point. That agency is one agency that should, that should be so effective that you should be able to. I'm sure you don't even know the National Orientation Agency. I'm sure you don't know.
I do.
Okay. No, because you know why I asked the question. It's not because you don't know there is a body called National Orientation Agency, but you probably just
do not feel enough of its impact.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So you just see the national. They are just, even on Twitter, they are just retweeting. They are just retweeting news. No national narrative. No what's it called? No project like something that you
public awareness project, which is called
and that is one agency that is in all 774 local government areas in Nigeria.
That's true.
So one of it started with Mamsa.
Yes, Mamsa.
I mean, to conscientize Nigerians about what the issues are. National Orientation Agency is not nowhere to be found. And they will come and tell you about the issue of funding. Why did you establish an agency that you can't fund?
Anyway, I think it's part of the issues, but I'll come back to you, Doctor. So where is the line between national interest and rule of law? Cases in sight in the eyes of the law. So we have retired Colonel Dasuki still in incarceration. We have the case of who else? I know we have the case of
Dasuki.
Yes,
Elzazaki.
Even Showore just at least a huge development yesterday on his case. The question is, we say national security and then we say rule of law, especially in terms of this administration. It was part of its campaign mantra in 2015 and the re-echoing for next level during the election we had this year. Where is that line?
Well, I think that and that's why we question the conversation about rule of law, and the way it is in Nigeria, it's more or less like, and that's the line. It's a line that is already taught by politics, so there are a lot of political intention to the extent that the definition of national interest, is a political definition. I ask myself, if Dasuki has been released on bail, to follow up with the cases, so what would he have been able to do? So what is the national interest issue around the Dasuki issue? Now on the Elzazaki issue, for a while it was actually under house arrest and it was not in any way affecting anything that was happening in the public. So we kept him there on that same excuse. Now somebody woke up one morning and said revolution now. You didn't even allow him to try the revolution.
And then he was being arrested.
He was arrested. And the next thing, you want to charge him for terrorism. So there is actually a political definition for what we see as national interest. There are countries where we've had a consistent, protest. Is it Hong Kong?
Hong Kong, yes.
It's been on.
It's been on.
So what more can be more of national interest? Something, even the fact that BBOG, they bring back our girls, have been on, was an issue, for the current. I think it's about a government not being tolerant, a government not also looking at what does the Constitution give in terms of what are the rights of its citizens, right to assemble, right to association, and all of that. So we cannot keep using that excuse to violate what the tenets of rule of law that we claim that we want to put in the society.
Okay, let me. I think I will take a little digression from that. On the case of Showore, I don't see why the government should have even bothered to arrest him. He posed no threats, really. If he posed no threat to anybody.
Is that what you think?
I think, my honest opinion, anyway, he posed no real threat.
But he was accused of trying to stage a forceful overthrowing.
Anybody can say
it was part of the allegations against him. Eventually,
anybody can just make a statement. Oh, I want to overthrow. It's that anybody that wants to really overthrow will not say it. Ab initio, you will just. Do you understand? On the case of El Zakzaky issue, you just act it. On the El Zakzaky's issues, his case was of two fronts. He was battling with the Kaduna State government on the one hand, and the federal government on another hand. Now, the federal High Court in Abuja gave him a bail, which the FG appealed, and he still had Kaduna State case to battle with. Do you understand? I think his lawyers likely ignored the Kaduna State case, because even the day they finally released him to go to India, his lawyers did not even participate in the ongoing case in Kaduna at the time. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? And he was granted bail. It was, as you know, the old comedy and the old drama before he now came back. Now, all these things, we should stop abusing the court process in Nigeria on the basis of technicality, on the basis of laws, on the basis of so many frivolous petitions. I get my point now. So those, I think, we need to what's it called? On the Dasuki case borders on corruption and national security. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? And I think the government has really overdone a lot itself in that regard. So if you ask me, it should be really. But on the Zakzaky case, I think the government was in order.
Let's wrap this up. From you, Doctor, what's the way forward?
Well, I think that we need to reassess what we mean when we say that we're upholding the rule of law. It's very important. There's a lot of executive lawlessness which we need to deal with as a country. And we also need to strengthen our accountability mechanism. The supply and the demand side, it's very important for that vertical accountability to happen. People must be able to make demand, and the government must be ready to be held accountable. The reports that are coming out of the country does not show that the government is ready to be held accountable.
Okay, from you, Mr. Adigun, your final thoughts.
My final thoughts are we should build strong institutions with strong people to occupy it. Because it's one thing to have strong institutions, it's another thing to have strong people to occupy strong institutions. Weak people occupying strong institutions will create further vacuum.
A lot has been said. Thank you very much. It's been quite an interesting topic, discussing the state of governance in Nigeria, and more importantly the culture of impunity within the Nigerian system. And we've been having this conversation with Mr. Olalekan Adigun, a public affairs commentator, as well as Dr. Abiola Akiyode-Afolabi. She is, of course, a lecturer, Department of Public Law in the University of Lagos, and also the woman in charge of the Transition Monitoring Group. Many thanks to you for your time.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, we're going to break now. It's time to hand over to the sports crew to take us around the world of sports. And when we come back, we'll be saying our goodbye. Stay tuned.
Comfortable as little chipmunk face Santi Cazorla welcomes the man in blue with the for Junior Firpo. Nice.